Hello friends, Tanya here for Spellbinders, and today I'm playing with the Spellbinders 2023 January 3D embossing folder and the beautiful new Anemone Blooms set from, suite from Yana Smakula. There are these beautiful dies. This is a glimmer foil with dies that say friend and the die cut the flowers. This one is a die with with two cutting dies. This one's called Anemone Blooms. It creates a beautiful detailed bloom. This one is the inside card Glimmer sentiments. There are several beautiful sentiments for the inside of your card that are encouragement, happy birthday, and some are a little bit snarky. That's fun. This is the Hello Friend Sentiments Glimmer foil plates. There are three big, beautiful, large sentiments, beautiful, hello, and wonderful, and then several building sentiments to go with those. This is the Wonderful Script Sentiments die set. This coordinates with the Glimmer dies, Glimmer sentiments. This says beautiful, wonderful, hello, and you also. And there are fine line dies and outline dies. Next, we have the 3D embossing folder of the month called Floral Archway. These are not exact matches to the anemones. However, I think they match very nicely. I love how they coordinate together, and I'm going to be using it today. I'm going to start out with the Inside Sentiments Glimmer foil plates, and I've taken one of the sentiments and I'm going to foil it with some polished brass foil. Next, I'm pulling out the Precision Layering Mini Slimline, and I'm going to pick one of these dies to die cut out this sentiment because that's how I prefer to do things. I know I will mess it up if I try to glimmer foil it exactly on the inside of the card where I want it, so I'm going to adhere it to the inside. I've cut that down with that die, and next we're going to take the Anemone Blooms glimmer foil plate, and I've got some satin gold foil here, which is, I am really loving the satin and the matte foils. They foil so beautifully. Just like Aura and Prism are some of my other favorites because they are top performers, I'm telling you. Next, I'm pulling out these Olo alcohol markers. This is a collection of 5 greens, 2 yellows, and a red. I thought this would be a perfect way to start my Olo collection and to just see if I really enjoy them. I've taken these markers and I'm going to color one of these glimmer foiled anemone bunches. I'm going to start out with the darker yellow, the more golden tone. There's a golden one and a kind of lemony yellow. And I'm using the golden tone as the darker highlight in these flowers. Now, anemones come in many colors, and usually the center is black. However, I wanted to stick with just using the Olo markers to color these, so I'm going to make them red with an orange tint. I'm going to go through and let the design tell me exactly where to put the shadow marks or the darker marks on these petals. And then I'm going to come back in and blend in the brighter yellow on each of these petals. I am loving these Olo markers. They have a continuous flow of ink. You don't have to slow down and wait for that marker tip to recharge itself. It's just constantly there, and it isn't trying to drip. I haven't had any problems with it having a blob or a burp. Sometimes with Copic markers, they will burp on you and you'll have a big blob of ink, but I haven't had that problem with these. If you haven't tried the Olo markers or looked into them, or if you're in the market for alcohol markers but don't know where to start, these might be a good place for you to start. There is our finished colored anemones. And now I'm going to foil some sentiments. Here we've got Wonderful. So I think it's wishing you a birthday as wonderful as you. So I've built that sentiment that's going to be on the front of our card. Now I'm going to die cut the wonderful word with that die set, the wonderful script sentiments. Now this font and style might look very similar or familiar to you. If you got the Yana's collection from last year, which I did and absolutely adored, you will find that these sentiments are in the same font, style, and size as the sentiments from that grouping. I will try to link those in the description box below today. And I did want to include those. However, there's so many beautiful products in this line that I wanted to highlight. I'm not going to combine them yet today. That'll be on a future video, I'm sure. I just know I will be unable to resist using them together. As I know if you have them, you will be unable to resist using them together. They make some beautiful, elegant cards, and they make them very easily. I'm just trimming down our little sentiments to help add those to the front of the card. And now let's create the main background piece. I'm starting out with a 5.5 by 8.5 inch piece of cardstock, scattered straw, wild honey, and ripe persimmon in distress oxides. And I'm just going to ink blend those all the way down our panel, just making sure to overlap the colors and make them blend nicely. I found the best way to keep my fingerprints off of the ink blending is to use a clear acrylic block, and that helps me hold them down. Now is when the Floral Archway 3D embossing folder comes into play. Now I'm using the universal plates A and D to run those through my die cut machine, and there's our gorgeous embossed piece. Next, I'm pulling out the Pearl Luster Gilding paste. It comes with its own applicator that fits right into the lid, and it comes that way, so you don't even have to find an applicator. I love that about the Cosmic Shimmer gilding pastes. And this is the pearl or the white or clear version, and I'm just going to use that to lightly highlight the raised portions of this beautiful 3D embossing folder. It's very easy to do this, and I'm using very light pressure. You could also use an ink blender and like the Simon Hurley pastes, paper glazes, all kinds of different mediums that do similar things. However, I did not have a pearl version in some of the other brands, and I happen to have that in the Cosmic Shimmer. I'm going to add a little extra dimension behind this panel with some scrap cardstock that I'm going to adhere to the back of our panel using some Barely Art glue. You certainly don't have to add extra dimension behind these panels, but I really like to do that. I like the way it looks. It adds just that little tiny bit of shadow behind our panel here on the card front. But if you're looking for less weight and less dimension for mailability, you could certainly skip that part. This is not so warped that you would need that extra stability like it is with some of the panels that we create. This one stayed delightfully flat. Next, I'm layering up the word wonderful that I have foiled and die cut. I cut 2 extra pieces of scrap cardstock in the same die, and we're going to layer those behind the foiled piece. Again, you don't have to do that. I just really enjoy the extra height that puts on my card. All of this is to give you inspiration to use your products, and it wouldn't even have to be these products. Whatever you have in your stash, if you're not looking to purchase more products, you can certainly use my designs to create your own with things that you already have in your craft room. Now this is the Essential Arches die set, and since that element is already built into this embossing folder, I thought it would be perfect to add a vellum layer behind our floral blooms here to give a little extra separation between the background and our main element. I've cut 2 extra pieces of cardstock with that same bloom die, and I put one directly behind the foiled part. I adhered that to our vellum arch, and then I'm going to adhere the other piece of cardstock behind the vellum to add a little height behind that. That again adds a little extra separation, a little extra detail, a little extra crispness to this design. Just going to let that glue really nicely set before I try to apply this to the front of the card. I don't need any extra dimension here, just going to adhere that directly to the background. And I am loving the way the shimmery pearlescence really adds something to this background. Now it's time to adhere the sentiment to the card front, and I'm going to just tuck it below the arch and below the flower on the bottom part of this card. Now I probably could have raised that center element up a little higher to keep this more centered on the card, but I think it's okay that this design is a little bottom heavy. Next, I'm going to take the foiled additional pieces of sentiment and adhering those to the front of the card, also with a little bit of extra dimension behind those with extra layers of cardstock. Next, we need to add our sentiment to the inside of the card, and since I've already foiled and die cut that, it's as easy as adhering it in the spot that I want. Now, typically we adhere things in the center of the panel, but I think it's a good idea to leave space for a personal message. Here's a close-up in motion view of this card, and I think it turned out gorgeous. Next, we're going to take these Anemones dies and cut the background out of black twice, and then we're going to cut the detail pieces out of a shimmery gold and some watercolor paper. I'm going to pop out all of the pieces, and then we're going to take those outline elements and adhere those to the background element. There are lots of great spots to add some glue, and I just add little dabs in strategic spots on the very fine line pieces and bigger strings of glue on the larger pieces. Now I'll just take one of these black outline pieces, background, and adhere that. And you know what? That's gorgeous. Just like that, you wouldn't have to do anything more. However, I'm going to take the watercolor pieces here, and I'm going to insert those inside the outline. I pulled out these Distress watercolor pencils, and I chose the Tattered Rose, which is a very subtle pink color, and I was going to color each of these and then add them inside, but I decided to go ahead and just color this one piece to test to see if I liked the color, and then add those to the inside of each of the pieces, or inlay them in each of the spots. I'm going to leave this in. I did speed this up quite a bit because this does take a few minutes. It's not difficult, but it is kind of soothing to just puzzle piece this together. You could, again, leave those pieces out, but I thought that I would make good use of the project, or of the pieces that I've cut. I do sometimes lay them directly over the area, and sometimes I pop them out on my table and then pick them up with my pickup stick. This is a very handy tool. You could use a crystal katana. Those are available in the Spellbinders shop. And there's lots of different brands that carry a wax tip on one end and a pointy tool on the other, and they all work fantastic to help with tiny pieces placement. I know that it's difficult for me to grab those little tiny pieces with just my fingers. We have almost all of the pieces laid into this design, and then I'm going to take that Tattered Rose colored pencil and add that to the shadowy parts of each piece. Here we've got the bud that's almost opened, the blossom bud. And I'm again following the designer's lead on where to put the shadow or where to put the darker parts of color. This is a little tough to see. I didn't realize how subtle it was going to look on camera, and I apologize for that. I would maybe for demonstration purposes choose some darker colors the next time and maybe color the entire petal. But this turned out just gorgeous in real life. It's just this really nice pale peachy pink that radiates from the center of the flower out. I'm using this watercolor paintbrush or aqua brush to add the blending of the watercolor pencil, and these watercolor pencils do a great job of blending. I maybe could have used a little heavier hand on this or a second application, but I think they still look beautiful. This is the first time I've used these Tim Holtz Distress watercolor pencils, and I do like them. I pulled a couple of browns out because I wanted to make a black center, and I thought maybe I could get a nice two-tone look here. This brown is much too light. I do come back with the black, and that looks much more intense, partly because I'm applying it to a wet cardstock or wet watercolor paper. A little bit of it does get onto the detailed outline die cut, and since it's a shimmery cardstock, I'm able to wipe it away with my fingertips. Here we've got both reverse and negative, or the gold and on white and the white on gold. Next, I've cut out some of the sentiments from that scripty die set, and I've taken the fine detail element and I'm going to adhere that to the shadow element, and I'm only going to show you one of these. The other two are going to be used on some other cards, and I'll show those to you on another video. This works very nicely to just start on one end and make your way across the entire die to line up all of your pieces exactly where you want them. Again, just little dots of glue over the entire word works well. I'm going to pull in another 3D embossing folder. This is called Beautiful Bloom, and I'm going to use the Tattered Rose Distress Oxide ink pad to direct to paper over the embossed parts of this cardstock. This is some 80-pound cardstock, smooth white cardstock. I can't remember which brand it is. Oh, Hammermill. That's what it is. Yes. Nina would work just as well. Or whatever white cardstock you have in your stash. You're just going to rub that ink pad over the top, and it does the same thing that Pearl Luster did, which is highlight the raised portions of the embossed item. I did cut this down to 4.5 by 6.5, and I'm going to again add another layer of scrap cardstock behind this panel just for the extra depth. It isn't for any structural reason. This is not so warped that it would not lay nicely on your card front. I am very much into making 5x7 cards. They are my favorite size to create, and I have a hard time making myself make a different size. I will try. I did just make a bunch of 4-inch square cards and mini slimline cards. So there you go. I am going to take this paper pieced main image, and I'm going to add a couple of extra layers of black cardstock behind this to add a little extra heft and dimension. And it doesn't really add a lot of weight or thickness. It just adds a real definition to our center point image here. These are very easy to line up, and I used some inexpensive black cardstock that I have in my stash to create that depth. You could use white cardstock. I just happen to have black cardstock I was willing to sacrifice for this. This is not going to be completely centered. I have this lined up with the outer edge of the cardstock and placed it kind of strategically between the embossed flowers. Next, we're going to take that word beautiful, and I've added some extra layers of cardstock behind the bottom loop of the F to keep that nicely balanced. This was also layered with 2 extra pieces of cardstock behind the word beautiful that were also die cut. Next, I'm going to take some scrap cardstock. This is again some smooth white Hammermill 80-pound cardstock, and I'm going to ink blend it with the Tattered Rose Distress Oxide ink on half of this. So it's like a A2 size panel, 4 1/4 by 8.5. No, 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I'm going to take this gold satin gold glimmer foil, and I'm going to foil that main bunch of anemones. Going to tack it down with some Best Ever Craft tape and foil that. It foils beautifully over this Distress Oxide inking. And then I'm going to use the coordinating die for that bunch of flowers, and I'll die cut that. Gorgeous. And I'm going to glue that on the inside of our card. Again, bringing the design from the outside of the card to the inside of the card. One of my favorite things to do. This is a pretty thin paper, relatively. The smoother cardstocks, the 80-pound smooth cardstocks, are pretty lightweight. We'll add that to the inside. Let that set up a little bit. And now I have to put a sentiment in here. I decide to bring the sentiment, make it a continued from the outside to the inside kind of sentiment. So it is going to say, "You are beautiful and perfect." So I've taken the "You are" and the "perfect" foiling plates, and I've taken the scraps of that Tattered Rose ink blended cardstock, and I am going to foil those here. And I'm using a die from one of the sentiment sets from, I think, this summer. I don't remember which one it is. I'll have to try and figure it out and link it in the description box below. But definitely dig through your stash and find sentiment banner dies that will work for you. You don't have to have a new die for every single set. It's kind of nice when they include them, so you don't have to dig through your die stash, but that's, a little lazy on my part if I don't want to dig through my dies. I am using some partial die cutting here to get them exactly the size I want, and I end up actually cutting off some of those dovetails, or one side of those dovetails for the "UR" part, so I can tuck that under the top portion of the T on the front of the card. Now in the inside, I realized that I'm going to adhere a banner over the top of the already colored portion. So I did foil that on some white cardstock and die cut that again. So we've got the "You are beautiful and perfect" all done. Now I wasn't quite finished. I pulled out the pink opalescent sequins from Spellbinders, and I'm going to dump them into this little triangle tray. I got a pack of 10 of them off of Amazon quite some time ago. It was very much less expensive that way. I have several groupings of 3 for these sequins, and there are 3 sizes of sequins in this mix. So I took one of each size and I scattered them in 3 different groupings across the front of this card to keep your eyes moving across the design. And that's it. That is my entire card number 2. And I hope you love these anemones as much as I do. Yana is such a beautiful designer. Here are a couple close-up looks at the projects that I used today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, now would be a great time to do that, and check that description box below for links to all of the products that I used today. Don't forget to leave me a comment below. I love to hear whatever you have to say. Until next time, here are a couple more videos I thought you might enjoy. Bye-bye.